Hello there, Thando Book Club lovers. We are so happy to have you join us as we talk to African female authors about their books and the stories behind them. As is our custom, we always begin every episode with a quote from a famous African that we believe captures the spirit and message of the author we'll be interviewing. Today's quote is from Ai Kwe-Ama, and it states, "Alone I am nothing. I have nothing. We have power, but we will never know it, we will never see it work, unless we come together to make it work." This quote sums up what our guest today champions in her work and in her book, Agringada, Like a Gringer, Like a Foreigner. Meet Tariro Ndoro. She is a poet and storyteller. She received a master's in creative writing from Rhodes University. Her debut poetry collection, Agringada, Like a Gringer, Like a Foreigner, published by Mojaji Books in 2019, received the inaugural NAMA Award for Outstanding Poetry Book. Her poetry, short fiction, and creative nonfiction have appeared in a wide range of literary magazines and journals, including Afrieda, the Kalahari Review, Kotaz, New Contrast, Oxford Poetry, and Puerto del Sol. Links to all her published works are available on her website. Tariro was shortlisted for the 2018 Babishai Niwe Poetry Prize, the Dalro Poetry Prize, and the Ntwasa Short Story Prize. Tariro has also made appearances at Pagia Literary Festival, Page Poetry Alive, Paza Sauti, Poems for the End of the World, and Word Fest. Tariro, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Selina.
I'm so happy to have you here on the book club, especially because you're in a new place in your writing journey. But today we'll obviously be focusing on Agringada, the poetry collection. So, why did you start writing?
I feel like I never have an answer for that question. I always just loved reading, and at some point I started writing, and that was just a natural sort of progression for me.
That's great. And understand that you actually started writing like when you were 8 in primary school.
Yes. So I think I always just wrote for myself, and then the allied arts competitions that they have, I had a story sent there, and it came back and they said you got this first class certificate and it had this gold filigree and all of that, and I was like, oh wow, I'm a writer, like someone likes what I write. So at that point in time it was just about enjoying the words, enjoying the craft, and I've been doing that ever since.
Definitely. And something you've also been doing ever since, I think, is entering a lot of literary competitions and literary stages and platforms that obviously amplify the arts and storytelling, fiction, nonfiction. And, you have a wide body of work across some of these different formats. And I find it interesting, the relationship between those platforms and those kinds of competitions within the literary ecosystem and how they've propelled you forward. So to your book, Agringada, Like a Gringer, Like a Foreigner. Tell us about the book title.
Okay, so Agringada literally means like a gringa, like a foreigner. And the thinking behind that is it's about othering. So, in Latin America, when someone says you're acting agringada, you're acting stuck up, or you're acting like a white person. And it's a word that I came across and I felt very, I don't want to say attached, but I felt very drawn to it, because I do feel in Africa we sometimes have that thing about it that, when someone acts a different way, you want to say, oh no, you're acting this way or that way. What Tsitsi Dangaremga talks about as chirungurira in her nervous conditions. And I think it's because when I was writing the book, I felt that I needed to talk about a part of my early life, which was sort of going to very white schools. And then when I came back and interacted with Black people, they'd be like that, why are you acting like this? You're acting odd. And then also when I went to university, I was in South Africa, and that quote by Zora Neale Hurston is that I feel most black when I'm by a white background. And it was that thing that, you go to another country and then you're suddenly like, oh, I'm Zimbabwean, I'm now a foreigner. When you're at home, you don't think about your identity until you're forced to. And so I think the book was a lot about me navigating those different things and unearthing a lot of memories and that sort of thing.
Definitely very powerful. And one of the most interesting insights for me, obviously, is the othering by our own people towards ourselves when we reassimilate or come back into our home territory. Even if it's the distance is just a few kilometers at the private school where there are 80% white people and 20% black people, and then you come back into your home setting and it's like this arm's length distance of, wait, that's not true to who we are as African, that's not true to who we are as black. So in your mind, you begin to occupy this third space, which isn't quite like a third culture, because it's not like your parents have gone to another country and lived there and have to assimilate. You're still in your country, and your home and your roots are still in that place. But now, like, there's this othering, whether you're going to the foreign place or with the so-called foreign people or the other race, and at the same time at home, you don't quite fit in there. And so it's interesting that you've spoken to that space, because I find like there are a lot of migrant stories. Yes. There are a lot of stories of people who've gone and had to really start to navigate what is a third culture, what is an African migrant story. But you are now talking about the reverse, I think, and a story that's not told. So thank you very much for doing that.
Sure. I hope it really resonated with someone else or helped them to navigate that same situation.
Definitely. Yeah. And people should go through the poetry collection for that reason, but also because I think it's a powerful literary project and it's a literary offering that is quite pleasant to read, quite thought-provoking, not jarring, but definitely, I think, a deep conversation. Well, I found it to be a very deep conversation, and I found it to be one of the more modern African stories that I could personally relate with. So I was very grateful that somebody was starting to put voice and to give a sound and a picture to what that looks like. And I think poetry is very forgiving, because poetry is very succinct, but also very vivid and powerful all at the same time. So we're going to take a short break right now, and we'll be back in a few minutes to unpack the book, A Gringada, Like a Gringer, Like a Foreigner. You don't want to miss this. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the Thando Book Club with me, your host, Selena Zigomo, and today we're interviewing Tariro Ndoro, author of the poetry collection, A Gringada, Like a Gringer, Like a Foreigner. And right now in this segment, we're going to be unpacking the book and some of its themes and poems. So, Tariro, the book has many big, powerful themes of our time that many academics, many millennials love to talk about, especially within the realm of identity politics. Things like colonization, xenophobia, and also education's role in that. May you please share how you came about with these particular themes and what your overarching message was?
Okay, so back in the day when I was at Rhodes University and studying creative writing, one of my instructors always just used to ask me, whenever I give you assignments, you seem like you're fighting against something, you're struggling against something. And, I'd always say, oh no, I'm struggling against, the old white form of writing, or I'm struggling against this. And he'd always say, no, that's not what you're struggling against, because that conversation has been had. And then afterward, like when I'd finished and I was at home, I had to think about it and ask myself, what is it that's limiting my voice? And I realized that, and this is sort of the first part of my book, some of the sort of rules that we have in our schools that, you mustn't speak in vernacular languages, you mustn't do this or that. It's an erasure of our voices and our stories. And in my fight to sort of reclaim my own identity and my own space, I was starting to see that, oh no, like when I'm in South Africa, I'm not speaking Shona as much as I do because I don't want to be targeted. Oh no, when I'm in this space that I feel is corporate, or when I'm in this space that I feel is bougie, I feel like I can't really be myself. And then I felt like I had to go back and call out all of those places that, you know, this space impacts people like this, or that other space is impacting people like this. And I was very interested in looking at the linguistics of it, because I think a lot of Zimbabwean writers have sort of looked at the politics of it or the sociology of it, but I was really interested in, you know, what's our national language, but not in terms of Shona and Ndebele English, but, you know, what stories can we tell and what stories are we holding back?
Yeah, very, very powerful. And language and linguistics, language from a linguistics point of view is a very strong theme in the book. And because the title is parlaying into Spanish, Latin America history, and their history with the same thing. It's very interesting how you've compared and contrasted to just shine a new angle and a new light on a story we think we know well. So I think that's very powerful. Now, another way in which you use the etymology of language linguistically in the book is with some of your animal imagery. The metaphor of the girl and the horse is particularly in the term Mustang, okay, which you break down in your book, but you have many other words that you break down in the book where you kind of give us the meaning, the grammatical format, the usage. And we all know that one of the great linguistic statements about usage is meaning is use. So we don't just derive the meaning of something from what it is referred to, but also how it is used in a context which speaks to space and time. And so you do this with that poem or that piece of prose around the word Mustang. Why the horse? Why is the horse a powerful image for you? Why is it such a powerful metaphor when it comes to girls?
Okay, so just as I was writing the book, one of the exercises that I put myself through is that I did a sort of word web, or like a writing web, where you cluster one word and then you just kind of think of different words that can relate to it. And the word that I'd actually used was tongue, because a tongue is a language. But you think about a lot of metaphors that you can use for the tongue, and they also apply to horses. So something like you bridled your tongue, you sort of held back. And in the same way, you bridle a horse, you sort of stop it from behaving as it wants to behave, so it behaves as you want it to behave. So I think that just gave me an entry point to do that. But, as I was looking, because I am a nerd and I love reading dictionaries, I think we've spoken about this. But when I was looking at the etymology, and I was looking at this word starts off as a Latin word, and then it goes into a Spanish word, and then it goes into Mexican Spanish, and then it goes into sort of like an Americanized word. And I was thinking of a quote that I read somewhere where it says, colonization results in a linguistic hot mess. So even a lot of the words that we use now, some of them are taken from Portuguese, some of them are sort of, English words that became Shona, some of them are Shona words that became Ndebele, some of them are Ndebele words that became Shona. And by sort of looking at our lexicon, we can look at our history, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. One of my favorite examples of that is the Shona word sabuku, which is actually derived from the English term so book. And not many people know that. So then, when we're all getting hot under the collar about tribalism and, our traditional practices, we sometimes don't realize we've taken on an othered or colonial expression as part of our own history and tradition. So right quickly before we go to break, you do reference primary school and education is a big theme throughout the book, and your personal experiences. How did you navigate the line between the personal and the private on a public platform like publishing a book like this that you knew was going to go basically everywhere and anywhere?
I think the nice thing about poetry, as opposed to prose, when you write prose, you have to be very direct and say, this is fiction or this is nonfiction. And when people read that, they read it with that sensibility. With poetry, on the other hand, I could be lying. It could have been about someone else, or, so there are lots of spaces where I've used, someone else's name. So it might say Lorraine, but it could have been Selena. I could say I saw this happening, but it could have been, you know, something that I sort of gleaned from someone else. So like I've done, there are a lot of places where I've sort of taken Selena's experiences and my mother's experiences and my own experiences, and then just kind of written it as one cohesive thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very clever.
Thank you.
Well, powerful insights there for us all to ponder. And it's time for a short break, but stay tuned. We'll be right back with advice from Tariro about writing and getting your voice out there. You don't want to miss this. You're watching the Thando Book Club and we're interviewing Tariro Ndoro. You're just in time to get some good advice on writing and publishing, and we can't wait to jump back into the conversation. So, Tariro, what did you learn from your process of publishing your book?
So my book was published in South Africa and it was marketed there. And, you know, when I got the contract, I learned very quickly that you have to be a business person as well as a creative. I know sometimes people look at things like writing or singing or acting and they think, you know, just be an artist and everything else will follow. But it's important to sort of have good legal representation. So when you're signing the contract, to know, you know, what am I signing? You know, how does that affect my earnings? How does that affect what I can reprint or not reprint or that sort of thing? What else did I learn? Then I remember so all my publicity was done in South Africa. Then I came back to Zimbabwe, and now I had to learn how to do publicity sort of on my own, and I'd be reaching out, you know, who do I know who's in this space? So I think the biggest lesson is every artist has to see themselves as a business person too. Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful lesson. You're actually one of the first guests that's mentioned that, you know, throughout our trajectory of interviews. And I find that so interesting because usually the people who are more attuned to that are the people who self-publish, but you trade published with Majaji Books. And people often think, well, I'm going to the trade publisher. They're the experts. They're the professionals. They'll guide me. And, you know, it's like almost like signing a contract with an employer. But no, it's actually an exchange between two business entities. It's just that you're one person representing a entity that is business-like, as opposed to a company with, you know, 4 floors and 40 people working there. So I think that that's powerful. What advice would you give to writers about getting their work out there, especially in light of what you shared about some of the lessons you had to learn about publicity when you came back to Zim?
I would say, so, and this is a lesson that someone taught me a long time ago, which I used myself. I think you did comment that I've published a lot of things on different platforms, is don't wait to write a book and then publish the book and then expect people to buy it. So even as you're writing, you know, you need to be sending your work out to competitions, to literary magazines. If you're a poet, you need to be doing readings somewhere, or if you're an extrovert, do the slams. Whether you win or not, it's just about, you know, getting your name out there so people know that there's a Selena Zigomo. So that, you know, once your book is out there, people don't sort of walk past it on, you know, in the bookshop. They actually think, I've heard this name before. And I think a lot of the people who bought my book when it first came out were, you know, people that I knew from the literary space, because I'd built those connections.
Yeah. Very, 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 very good. And that really got me here in terms about getting your name out there as you're writing. So what's your next project?
So I'm keeping it to myself a little bit because it's very different. I think I've done a lot of poetry and now see myself as a poet, but I also like writing fiction. So I've just kind of finished the first draft of a novel. I still need to fix a few things, and yeah, you'll see it one day on the bookshelves.
Well, we hope to catch all of the announcements and publicity around it, definitely, so that we can grab our copy as soon as it hits the shelves and so we can review it here on the book club.
Definitely.
So one of our customs is, as we wrap up every interview, we like to hear a reading from the author, and we usually ask the author to select something that they believe women need to hear right now. So Tariro, would you give us the honor of hearing your voice as you read something from your book?
Okay, I always have this thing that before I read, I decide what I want to read, and then something else comes to mind. So I'll actually read two poems very quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the first one is called Hyssop. Wash me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Kelly's Beach. My fascination is with the sound of the ocean, of the rolling, rushing waves, as in stuffing fingers in my ears and hearing the blood rush. My wonder lies with cargo carrying ships, blowing foghorns in the harbor. Love, let us swim in salt water. I will be clean. Do black girls have dandruff too? A stray memory pushes to the surface. Must have been 14 years ago. The smell of head and shoulders, hot water, hostile showers, but it's the white beach sand in my hair that sends me there. Wash me with hyssop. Sometimes a big wave knocks you out, sends you tumbling underwater, washing you onto the beach like seaweed or litter. Life can be brutal that way. Storm's River Gorge carries the broken dreams of the Eastern Cape's broken dreamers. And how many times did you try it? There are no secrets here. Did you ever succeed? Wash me and I will be clean. You have forgotten your family name, my father says. Let us sing now of conches and kings. He plucks a conch from the ocean, asks if I know what it means. A spiral tattooed to the bodies of ancient kings. He who has the conch rules them all. And what is your name, he says. That is who you are, my child. Wash me. The wind and the waves and the Indian Ocean wash your soul. Even floundering, even treading water, even spat out by a mighty wave, the white sand granules stuck in your braids. You are absolved now. You are made clean. And then a short one just for you because you kept asking about the horses. The Dance of the Mustang. But are you tired of apologizing for being all the lines that tether you and for occupying all the geographies that can't hold you? Remember this. There are different ways to say a thing, with hands, with faces, with song. I spoke with a foreign man once. I did it with my eyes. I said the word and let it hover. They'll tether your tongue like they tether the geldings, but you remain unbroken Mustang. See how other Mustangs move. They gallop. See how they gallop. They run. And how do Mustangs run? With the wind.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selena.
It's been another great edition of the Book Club with our guest, Tariro Ndoro, author of Agringada, Like a Gringer, Like a Foreigner. See you again next week, same time, with another fabulous African female author. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay true. Goodbye.